Hello and welcome to Code Creative. I'm Travis Tolson. Getting an early start today with the Code Creative Live. I'm going to be flipping back over to our skeleton loading again. So for those who are just joining and haven't gone through the first three parts, basically what we've been doing is we've been building a simple list widget that does this little skeleton, and login. Right, that would help.
Good job.
Yeah, I know. Let's try that again. So when we reload, we get that brief little skeleton load. So instead of hitting the server, requesting all the data, and only rendering the page once all the data has been obtained, we're rendering the page immediately and then asynchronously going back to the server in order to get the data. And while that asynchronous call is Dave Spangler, and away we go. Logins are overrated. They are. They are. If there were no logins, there would be no security breaches. That may not be how that works.
Don't think so, bro.
No? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, basically we've created this custom widget, and we've got a few things left on it to go. First of all, I have added a couple of instance options to it that last time were not working properly. Notably, this disable async and show skeleton. So essentially, I wanted to be able to, through a couple of flags, change it from a synchronous to an asynchronous. And wait, you're in the chat now too?
Yes, I'm in the chat now.
You're in the chat and on the mic.
I'm not on the mic.
You're on my mic.
Well, I can't help it they can hear you. I like to let everybody else know that I'm there and talking to them too. You're not the only one in the room.
All right. So I wanted to add some options here that would allow us to flip between the default simple list behavior and MHC says she can double smack you this way. I can get shut down on chat and verbally, all from the person right next to me.
That's what I'm here for.
So I can be hit from the front and behind at exactly the same time. Oh gosh, too true, too true. So yeah, I added these instance options so that I could get both the default simple list behavior and the asynchronous with the skeleton or without the skeleton all in the same. And now that I think about it, I may shift the show skeleton, disable async. We might go to a choice list instead now that I think about it, because that might more clearly communicate this one. But either way, that behavior wasn't working. You can see that this one is supposed to have disabled async, but when I refresh, it still appears to show, because I think this one's, I've got the same way. Yeah, see, both of those are supposed to be disabled for the skeleton, but it's showing. So that instance option isn't working at all. So that's the first thing I'm going to try and address. The second thing is we have no link right now, no hyperlink. So we need to fix that. And then the last thing that I wanted to fix about this list before I think we'll close it up and wrap up this particular chapter is the design. You're staring at me.
Yeah.
Does it suck that bad?
It's the out of box. It's very simple. But I'm staring at you because I was like, I swear if you finish this out without doing something with the design, I might have to hit you.
So we're going to take a George Carlin routine and we're going to let's liven it up a little. So those are the three things that I'm hoping to address before we wrap it up, and we'll see how far we get with that today. All right, so to start, let's go ahead and reload this because it's probably stuck on the old session. All right. So the first thing that I want to do, let's get rid of this old instance option set. Let's get rid of Well, here, let's create the new one first before I go getting rid of the old ones. Let's see, I want to do a choice list instead. And we'll call this one the load behavior. Dave Spangler asks, does that mean we get to rename it Not So Simple List now? Yeah, I guess we can. The really complicated list. Let's see. So load behavior, choices. So list version 2.1.5.
Well, yeah, because when you give the final, it's never the final. There's the final, and then there's tweaks. So it's the final, and then the final, edited final.
I don't think I like you on the stream anymore.
Well, then tell my public that.
All right, so choices are going to be, we'll say synchronous, asynchronous, and asynchronous with skeleton. Not enough finals. I don't know. That's more your thing. You're the one that actually lasted through college, so.
No, they're talking about like the final drafts and stuff like that.
I know. I'm twisting it.
Ha ha ha. You're punters, so they hurt me.
I'm sorry. Okay. Determines when the data for the widget loads and what is displayed while loading. So there we go. We'll go with that. Yeah, I feel halfway decent about that. So then we'll get rid of the old ones. Disable async and show skeleton. We'll get rid of those.
When you're doing your custom widget options, the little hint is really helpful for developers that come in behind and have no idea what stuff does. So I appreciate that as the developer that's coming behind.
I imagine it's also helpful to actually have all the instance options configured as instance options.
Oh, don't trigger me, man. I hate hidden with instance options.
We were just dealing with an issue on a widget last night where the instance options existed over here in the script, but they were not set up in the option schema. And she had set up a widget using those options previously, but couldn't remember how she did it.
Are you calling me? You just called me out, didn't you?
I don't think I called you out.
I think you did.
I don't think I called you out.
Remember how to set up her own widget. It
wasn't your widget. It was somebody else's widget.
The one from yesterday?
Uh-huh.
That was my widget.
That was your own widget.
It just been over a year since I've touched it.
Well, you just called yourself out then.
I mean, no, that was somebody else's widget.
Totally somebody else's widget.
It's a friend of mine.
All right. So let's see here. All right. So with the change to those options, we got to update our normalize function. And what did I call that option? Let me copy this over to my text pad. And you guys can't see this because it goes off screen, but on another monitor, I almost always have some text editor open, and I just kind of copy stuff off to it. It's like my extended clipboard, which again, there's probably a better tool for that, but you know. And I actually have to move it because it's in the way of the chat, so I can't see what anybody's saying. I think I need a third monitor.
Why? We're talking
let's see.
Dad jokes and how often.
Oh, dad jokes.
And then John Hellbrant? Is that
John, how's it going?
Your last name? Sorry, I'm bad. The not so simple list.
Behavior. So we're going to change this to the load behavior. Options dot load behavior. We'll get rid of disable async. And that should fix that. Next up, I've got to come down here. And so basically, if we are, if it's asynchronous passing input, or if our load behavior is synchronous, then I want to go ahead and execute this and pull in my list items synchronously, or during this script, because if it's asynchronous or if the load behavior is synchronous, that should load the items. And then we also have to come over here, and if the options load behavior is not equal to synchronous, then I'm going to assume that it's one of the async ones. Confusing use of, oh, I had a double knot. So let's fix that.
Keep your shoes from coming untied.
And you complain about my puns.
But mine are funny.
Only because I appreciate puns and you don't.
I can't stop laughing.
Oh my goodness. Let's see. So if the load behavior is synchronous, data is loading. Oh, here's the other piece. If we are loading and the load behavior is async with skeleton, and we're going to save that and we're going to see what happens and hope nothing breaks. Okay, we've got the preview. That looked decent, I think. Did it load the... It did not load the skeleton. Oh, wait, let's check our... Actually, let's do this. Let's come up here and let's add our default option. So load behavior, our default is going to be async with skeleton. Ooh, that looked good. Okay, good response from the simplest. If you watch the preview there, when I save, the skeleton shows up. It loads asynchronously. That is behaving how we want it to. Now let's come over here and let's check our instance options and configure a few things here.
Can I ask you a question? You have the preview window open, but I've noticed on a lot of my widgets, I can't get the preview window to open. What's the difference?
Okay, yeah. So basically, if you come over, in case anybody didn't hear Sarah, she was asking that on some widgets, she's not able to bring up the preview window in the editor here, and she was wondering how to do that. Basically, if you come here to the hamburger menu, you'll see an enable preview checkbox.
Are you serious? That's what I'm not doing?
Yes, that's what you're missing. Some of them have it checked by default. Some of them don't.
It's not checked by default in all of them. That's why I'm not.
And that may, I can't remember if that's a user property or a property per widget. I can't remember exactly how that is, but that's what you need to check, is make sure that checkbox is tagged in order to get that to pop up.
That's it? Okay, yeah, sorry, dumb question.
Now, in case anybody missed what I was looking at before, I completely borked something with my instance options, because synchronous, asynchronous, and asynchronous with skeleton is not supposed to be an option. That's supposed to be 3 independent options. So let's check the option schema and look at our choices. 1 line per choice. Following directions was never one of my strong suits. Just ask the United States Marine Corps. Okay, I think that worked. Let's try this again. Instance options. There we go. Okay. So before I do anything, let's check. Okay, everything loads with skeleton by design. That's our default option. Now I'm going to set these two to synchronous. Ooh, it's looking good. It's looking good. This one to synchronous. Oh yeah, I'm loving this. Instance options, we'll set these two to asynchronous. And this one to asynchronous. So these two should be without the skeleton. And you notice that when it loads, it's just blank. And then the last ones, I don't have to set it, but I will. Asynchronous with skeleton. And I'm actually going to take this one step further because in all reality, even though I don't trust the default options in here, even though, come back. Wait, stop. No, go back. I don't even know. Asynchronous with skeleton. Default value short description for that one. Let's save it. All right. So now we should be all set. And if I reload, there we go. This column is immediately available on page load. This column here loads shortly thereafter, but does not show a skeleton. And the final one, you'll notice, shows the skeleton. Now, why all the complexity? Well, it depends. Let's go ahead and clear my cache real quick. And let's see what a fresh load does and see if it impacts. In this case, it may be so fast that it doesn't. It may have no impact for this particular widget. We'll find out. That actually loaded faster. Everything loaded faster. All right. Interesting. So I actually expected that the no skeleton synchronous load, I expected it to run a little bit slower. Or wait a second, that's generated in, okay, let's go with, isn't there a way to check the page load time aside from my performance console? I thought there was something in Service Portal itself. I know there is in the native UI, but I thought Service Portal had it too. I thought it had something. We
need to work on your musical interlude skills.
But I like my musical interludes. All right, let's just do a reload. Well, first let's do this. Let's set all of my instance options to, and I'll shrink this up a bit as well so I can quickly flip. Instance options, waiting. Whole lot of waiting. There we go. All right, so I'm going to set this to async with skeleton. I'll set the other one to async with skeleton. Basically what I want to do right now is, and this is just out of sheer curiosity, I am interested to see how long the page takes to load with all of them asynchronous versus all of them synchronous. I just want to see if it has an impact. So let's see. Let's reload. Now, what I don't know is if there's a page load that I have to include in this. Tor, Spawn Awesome, SP Patch, SP Bootstrap, app. I think I can just go off of this one. Maybe? I have no idea. I don't know. Let's clear that. Oh, wait a second. Load, 1 second. All right, so here we go. Let's see. DOM content loaded, 375 milliseconds. Load, 398 milliseconds. So 500. We'll round up 500. Rounding up 500. So it looks like we can pretty consistently hit at 500 milliseconds. The finish is at 1 second. So we're sitting around half a second to 1 second. Half a second on load, 1 second to finish for the whole page. So now let me go through the instance options and set all of them to synchronous, and let's see if there's an impact at all on this. I'm suspecting that there should be some impact. I don't know if it's going to be huge because these queries are fairly efficient. Compare this to some of the queries that I've seen in production instances where there's a lot of nested queries and stuff like that, or slow ACLs, and this stuff can get a little more hairy. This is especially true in customer service management, where there's a lot of account checking and there's a lot in terms of query modification and such that goes on in the background. Of any portal I've ever developed, it's only been my CSM portals that have flopped over and died performance-wise and required indexes to be added and all kinds of craziness. And it's not a knock against the CSM application, mind you. It's just the nature of how that application's developed. By design, it has more checks and balances in it. All right, so let's see. First load, 800 milliseconds and 117 to finish. Second load, we got down to 500, and that's actually the fastest finish we've had for synchronous load. 400. So this is interesting. Right now, it actually seems to be performing better with all synchronous, which is really interesting, and I would not have expected to see that. Let's flip it back to, and of course, you know, with network, it's hard to tell exactly. It's hard to nail it down because at any given moment in time, especially with the live stream going, you know, is something happening in the network packets? Is something happening on the network? Has a bunch of people come home and started watching Netflix? I have no idea.
All the kids are home from school.
All the kids are home from school.
Mm-hmm.
Darn kids and their Netflix. So it's challenging to pin it down exactly, but I will say that I am surprised. I expected the asynchronous with skeleton to have a faster initial page load, but to potentially take longer to finish the overall load. Flipping to async across the board just to rerun some of these. And one more. All right, so clear out, reload. 800 on initial, 1.45 to finish. And then we're immediately back down to our half a second to a second. So yeah, and that's the lowest finish we've had for async. So overall, it looks like the two methods are actually in roughly the same ballpark, with synchronous actually being a little bit faster on these really efficient queries. And this goes back to what I was saying in one of the first videos, where you've really got to test your different scenarios. You've really got to test this with your user base to see which they prefer. You may find that one provides a better user experience despite the fact that it actually loads faster. Perceived load is a very important concept in user experience. So, you really got to pay close attention to the details on it. And, the other part of this is, like I said before, if you're MHC says, I don't have caching disabled in my dev tools. Oh my goodness. Outstanding catch. Timings might be more accurate. Yep, you're right. So what he was saying was that this disable cache was not enabled. So essentially, anytime I reload the page, it could be hitting my client-side cache and therefore completely skewing the performance numbers. So let's just give a quick check. Oh, we're a lot slower now. We're a lot slower now.
Why is it so slow?
Because we disabled the cache. So now it's actually, so basically there's multiple levels of cache when you request a page. Sarah asked, why is it so much slower now? And basically there are multiple levels of cache whenever you're dealing with web content. You can have the browser cache, which is literally on your machine. It is on your computer. If there's a successful cache hit on your computer, then whether it's an image, a web page, basically your browser doesn't have to hit the server for that content at all. It retrieved it from the local cache.
Okay.
There's also server, CDNs are a form of cache, and then you have server-side caching. So even though I cleared my server-side cache with the cache.do, I did not have my browser cache disabled, and so it could have been skewing the timing. So this time we've got a load of 2 seconds, finished in, well, that can't be right.
You could be rich with all that cash.
Wow. Not that kind of cash.
I know, it was there. I'm sorry.
All right, so finish in 2.25 seconds, load in 1.75. .78, 2.25. So it looks like 1.25, 2.25 is what we're getting off of this one. Let's see what we get when we go straight synchronous again. Surprised she didn't ask if you were talking about Johnny Cash.
Who said that?
Crash.
I don't see it.
You don't see it? It's on, it came through Twitch.
Oh, it's on Twitch.
Twitch. What, are you on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm going back and forth.
Ah. Oh, you don't have my master stream.
No, I don't have your master stream.
Ha 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 ha. My secret tools. That, the smarter dev folks told me about.
Nice.
Yeah, I could not be doing this whole live stream thing without lots and lots of help from the dev MVP guys. They were giving me all kinds of info, and and the developer advocates too, Barnes. All of them were giving all kinds of info on how to get started with this stuff, what to use. So helpful. All right, so we got all of it set to synchronous now. Let's do our reloads. Okay, so that was absolutely atrocious this time. The load was 4 seconds. The finish was 4.3. Hopefully it's a little bit faster a couple more times. There we go. So now we're getting much closer to what I expected. Oh, Kevin Eldridge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's Crash. I keep forgetting whose username is which person. And I can't just like hover over to get their name.
You know, back in the day, you didn't have problems with keeping people's names straight when we played World of Warcraft.
Well, that's because all of them went by their screen name.
Oh, that's true.
2 second load, 2.48. Okay, perfect. MHZ, thank you so much for pointing out the disable cache. With the browser cache disabled, I'm now getting much closer to what I expected to see. So now with all of these set at synchronous, you can see that this page is now taking, whereas with the async, it was taking 1.25 seconds to initial load. It's now at 2.25 seconds to initial load. And I want to say it was like 1.75 or something like that for the final render, and now we're up in the 2.8 second range. So, this is much closer to what I expected to see. And this is where you can imagine if you had more complex queries, slower queries on any of these simple lists, or even on the main content itself. Some of the forms, for example, have multiple queries that have to be performed in order to render that content. That plus a handful of synchronous simple lists, and you could dramatically slow down your portal page. And since, from user experience tests, we know that, from the commercial side of things, the B2C community, we know that there's a lot of money on the table per second of load time. People are accustomed to very quick web pages, very quick loading, and they are very quick to abandon self-service when your web page runs slow. And this is one of the few drawbacks that I'll point out on Service Portal, is that it is fairly heavyweight in terms of a front-end content management system. That is why I look for tutorials on how to use service directives to house that data. Yes, MHC points out that he uses service directives to house this data that will be shared amongst widgets. And this is something that I use extensively in my own widgets. In fact, in one of my knowledge presentations, I discussed inter-widget communication and highlighted that Angular services are my preferred way of handling inter-widget communication and sharing data. Basically, for the React folks out there, an Angular service can function and can be treated in the same way as a React Redux store. So you can get approximate to the single direction flow in your UI by using that. It's not true single direction flow because Angular with ng model especially still uses two-way bindings. There's ways of dealing with that as well if you want to keep things sensible, but it is a little more complicated than systems that use true single direction flow. But that's going down a technical rabbit hole.
Is that the making service portal widgets work together presentation you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
making service portal widgets work together was the name of the session, and I discussed the Angular services in that session. These Angular services are really great. I actually started working on kind of a master Angular service once upon a time that would essentially allow you to create a glide record like query in the client script, and it would cache the results behind the scenes in order to share that data amongst widgets. And so basically, you could write glide record style queries in your client script and have no real understanding of the underlying implementation of how it was being retrieved. You could bypass the server script altogether. I got close to something functional on it, but I never quite finished it. In part because the whole UX framework conversation started coming out, and I was like, I'm wasting all this time on this daggone service. And
In chat.
huh?
I put the link to it in chat.
Oh, cool. Thank you. So Sarah dropped the link for the inner widget communication session in the chat. If you're on Twitch, I think she's in the YouTube and put it in YouTube, so you guys may not be able to see it. All right, so, but yeah, so basically this is much closer to the results I was expecting. You know, the load time does take longer. You know, and I would honestly say significantly longer, because I mean you're talking a jump from what was it, 1.75 or something like that, 1.25 initial load,
Like 3 or something like that.
to up to 2.5 on this one. So that time it loaded faster. That time we got it down to 1.78. You know, but you can see that loading this stuff synchronously does take more time to initial load. And if you're thinking about stuff like a knowledge page, a knowledge base article, you know, load the article synchronously. Absolutely. There's no point in rendering a blank page just to go back and fetch the primary article you're showing. But if you have a bunch of related lists off to the side showing, you know, related article content, maybe consider loading that asynchronously so that those queries aren't holding up the overall page load. Yeah, MHZ says you have to watch if you're on Wi-Fi, which I am not only on Wi-Fi, I'm also on Wi-Fi through a couple of walls, doors, and probably a few small children's heads, but I am on Wi-Fi, and you know the instability of Wi-Fi can absolutely skew the numbers. The fact that I'm streaming could skew the numbers. I mean, there's so many variables on the network that could potentially skew the numbers. But just from a logical perspective, you can estimate that at least some of the time, even if it's only the first time that a user goes to your service portal, you can anticipate that certain caches are going to be missed because they haven't populated those caches. And you can anticipate that the synchronous load will take at least a little bit more time than an async load. You know, and by strategically choosing when to use synchronous versus asynchronous, you can get a better result in your portal. You know, and that's why I've said in the past few parts to this, I highly recommend using synchronous loading on the primary content for the page, the primary reason you're loading that page, and then your secondary supporting ancillary content. You know, for that stuff, is when you want to use the asynchronous load. You know, you can load that after you've presented the user with what they're looking for. All right, so let's keep on coding, and I'll jump off my soapbox and my over-analysis of microseconds of page load time.
Well, microseconds are important.
It won't hurt the kids' heads. It's fine. It's all good. All All right, so let's see. What did we have next? What did I want to tackle next? I got that working. I got my options working.
Did you want to do something with the way the simplest looks?
I don't want to do that yet.
I thought there was something else in between.
There was something else in between.
We gotta write this stuff down.
I know. This is the beauty of coming completely unprepared. Let's see. There's meta fields. I was kind of thinking about ditching the meta fields for now. Maybe dealing with that some other time when I actually need it and feel like going through the pain of it. Unless somebody really wants me to do the meta fields and populate meta fields, I'm happy to skip that. I'll leave it just in case in the next few seconds when the... Huh?
I got like 10 minutes.
You got like 10 minutes?
I've got it.
Where are you going?
My attention will be divided.
Your attention will be divided? You're going to be abused by a small child?
I'm going to be abused by a small child, yes.
Our youngest is rough, y'all. If you don't mind. All right, well, Crash says that he would like to see the meta fields, so sure, let's go for it. Let's see. Okay, so basically the meta fields in my mind, what I was looking to go with here. Yes, parent abuse, Jace. Parent abuse. And I know you know that's a thing.
It's totally a thing.
Oh, I didn't want that page. Just the SP page. Parent Protective Services. Isn't that like grandparents? I think grandparents are Parent Protective Services.
Like elder abuse type stuff.
Let's see. All right, so for the metadata, this is kind of what I'm thinking of for the meta. This is just like the, you can stick tags down there or whatever. I don't know. That's what I'm referring to as the meta information. And on some simple lists, you'll see it shuffled off to the right-hand side. I've seen some where it has like a little info popover. He and I both know that very well, from his kids to my kids. Wow, parent abuse. Oh, are you in the Twitch now?
Yeah, I finally got in. I had to like recover my password and everything. It's been a while.
All right, so meta fields. For meta fields, what I want is a comma-separated list. So let's do this. We're going to, and this is, no, I'm not going to do it. I do need to convert my comma-separated list into an array. And I'm not going to do it here. I'm not going to be that guy. I was tempted to do this to kind of shorthand inline the whole thing and do split, comma, and split it that way. But I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to separate it out. I'm going to keep my my responsibilities separated here. Let's see. Get list items. Data is loading, items. All right, so I need to change my get list items here. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to create a new function. Now, do I want to? No, I don't really want to. Let's see if I can get away with it. Let's see what we can get away with. All right, so for our meta, I don't need a field name for, well, okay, I see what I was going for here. I've got an array of fields. An array of fields, and each one is returning something. All right, we're going to create it. We're going to create this function. And we'll we'll call it get get field view object. Field, and I will pass a glide record and a field to this function. Yeah, we do not both have a multi-monitor setup. Sarah works on the couch. I used to work on the couch too, but when I started doing the streaming thing, it got kind of weird pulling out a monitor and setting it randomly on the coffee table. So I decided to, and my back started killing me from sitting on the couch hunched over a computer all day. So I've been playing around with a new desk setup. Yeah, my whole office is constantly changing. All right, so for this function, I am going to pass in a glide record and return a field. And what we're going to do is return an object. And we're going to say value gr.get value, and we need ops as well, apparently. Or actually, no, I don't need ops for that because that's going to be the field name. So field name, get value, field name, display underscore value, gr.get display value, field name. And finally, we will give the field name, and we'll just pass the field name straight through. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm creating a quick function, and as I said in the last one, I don't have to pass this function name as a parameter. I don't. No, I don't. Actually, no, let's not do it that way. I feel like that's ugly. What we're going to do is I'm going to instead put this as a dependency now, because that means that's going to get called every time that calls. I think I can live with that. Now we're gonna yeah, I'm gonna pass this in as a dependency. I'm just gonna be explicit about it rather than using closures and what have you. I'm just gonna pass it in so that my dependencies are explicit. This function knows that it requires that function. And what we're going to do is opt.item title field, and now I can get rid of this. And then I can do the same thing for the description field. And I can get rid of that. Okay. All right, so the whole reason I built this function was for building out the meta, because I have an array. I have to be able to I have to be able to pass these values over and over and over again. I have to pass each field in and generate this type of object. And I wanted to simplify the function that I was going to be dealing with in here. So generating the meta, I have to get my meta fields. So opt.metafields dot for each will iterate pass the field name and ooh, what happened? Don't make functions within a loop. Ah, yeah, I know. Don't make functions in a loop. But what about just this one time? Let's see. How can we go about this? All right, we're going to strip this stuff out. I'm just going to include it inside, and we'll include the whole set inside as a closure. Functions in a loop are quote unquote bad from the perspective of performance. Basically, each time that loop is executed, the function has to be recreated. At least that's my understanding of it. And I'm sure a lot of that probably depends on the JavaScript engine, the JavaScript interpreter itself, and how it handles it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go back to what I was originally considering, which is internal functions. Not what I wanted. Yeah, exactly, Jace. It's just like redeclaring a variable. And I'd have to assume that a smart enough interpreter would be able to figure that out, would be able to figure out that here's a function declaration within a loop. Don't do it, but I don't know because I've never honestly tried to write something like that before. So I don't know if that's sensible or not.
I'm just reading the chat.
What about it?
The double knot was definitely an ice shoe.
The baby has drooled into the room. Yes, yes. The youngest has joined us. What's up, little buddy?
Have you shared pictures of this baby outside the company?
Probably not.
Y'all, he's really cute.
Blah, 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 blah. And Dave Spangler says, same concept, but theoretically can have a bigger impact. Not that I've seen it cause any major problems yet. Good to know, Dave. Thanks for sharing that. I haven't seen it cause any significant issues myself. I mean, honestly, in most cases, we try to keep the iterations to somewhere around the range of about 20, 100 at most anyway. So a lot of, when it comes to these performance issues in JavaScript, I can guarantee you that any day of the week, the performance of your glide record query is going to be far worse than including a function inside that loop. Every time, guaranteed, without fail. Simply making the query is going to take more time in terms of performance than basically the entire rest of your function in most cases. Jay says it's not a problem if I can't see it. Exactly. If it And that's my thing is, and I know I know there are some folks that get hung up on, really, really minute performance details. I tend not to. If it's not impacting my users, if I can't see a blip on the radar, then it's not a problem. Oh yeah, Jace, GR calls are terrible. Yes, I agree. Especially when you start nesting them, or the hidden nested ones. Oh gosh. And some of the portal widgets that exist have nested glide record queries built into them. You don't see it when you read the code, but if you dive in and pick it apart, there are nested glide record calls in them, especially for your tree view type things like the knowledge base category picker, or the category drill down. And I don't know if that's still a prominent one that's used in the default portal or not, but I know that one had a lot of issues for a while with large catalogs. I mean, it would flat out destroy performance on the knowledge base home. Having type on Travis's keyboard, that wouldn't be too distracted. Oh wow, James Neal joined in 10:30 p.m. his time. Thanks for joining, man. Welcome.
Where is he?
He's UK.
Oh. Cool. I don't know time zones. I don't pay attention.
I'll bet you he has the accent.
I bet he does. Because you know what you don't have? The accent.
Sarah trashes me all the time because I have a whole British line in my family. But, American born, I have no accent. And so she ridicules me all the time because I didn't get the accent.
Again with the calling me out, man.
James says, I do.
He does, in fact, have the accent.
Well, clearly we're going to have to get him a mic on the stream sometime.
Well, there you go. You can stream with him. Like I said, I'm just here for the jokes.
Let's see. I don't even remember where I was. Let's see. Get field. Okay, right. We were iterating the meta object or the meta fields. So what I needed was to move that function out. And we'll call this one each meta field. Really? Okay. Should I be doing it differently?
You work.
Well, he's talking to me. He helped me beat you guys at Go Fish last night. Let's see. Each meta field, we're going to pass the field name is what I wanted to pass. And then what we wanted to do was call get list items. And I'm actually going to end up changing that to a map. And we'll say return, not get list items. We wanted, let's give a little visual separation there. Get field view object is what I really wanted. And we're going to pass kind of hoping this works. I don't know. Oh. Let's see. I think that might work, but I'm not sure. We'll find out. We'll see how it goes. GR field name. And then we're going to change this to map. And for those that don't do a lot of array manipulation, what map is going to do is it's going to loop It's basically a for each that loops through each of our meta fields. It's going to pass that meta field to the function, and it will take the return object from the function, which in our case is going to be our get field view object, and it'll basically create an array with that with that returned object. So to give you an example, if I were to do something like this, return item plus 1, then the result would be an array that was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, so Jace points out, really map just gives back a new array. Right, it's going to turn around and it's going to take this array, it's going to pass each item in, and then it's going to create a new array with the result of this function applied to each item as it goes. So map, and we'll say each meta field was the name of our function. So each meta field gets passed to this one, which calls our get field view object, which should return our result. I've got to get rid of that. Okay. Where are we at? Where are we at? Where are we at? Options fields. Okay, so in this case, I should get my assigned to, and now I need a place to shove it. I need to put this in the view somewhere. So I've got title, description. Here's what I did. All right, so we're going to take this div, and I'm going to create a series of spans using ngRepeat, which ngRepeat is basically a for loop in AngularJS terms. And we're going to say for each meta in, what's it going to be? Item dot meta. I kind of don't like that name. Let's say meta fields. That feels a little bit better, at least. For each meta field, let's say for each field in meta fields. And then we'll throw field.displayValue. And I don't know if this is going to work or not, to be honest. Yeah, that didn't go well. Cannot find function get value in object number, line number 25. So if I hit 25, cannot find. Okay, so basically what's happening here is pretty much what I was concerned about, which is when we call map, we pass the field name to each meta field, but gr doesn't get passed. So gr is undefined in here. Baby is saying meta, meta, meta. Where'd you go? Oh, you're down there now.
Yeah, I'm down here.
All right, so gr at this point is undefined. So I'm going to use a really, really quick trick to fix this. And I'm going to return a new function. So we're going to create a closure here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass gr in into the first function, which is going to return my actual iterator function. Check how the preview is pulsing while you review the errors. Not gonna lie, it was a little bit distracting. I almost closed the preview because I was having a little bit of trouble reading the errors with the pulsing in the background. It's a great animation, not for a background to errors though. So then what we have to do is we got to come down here and we'll pat. What? I'm sorry. What?
He's not talking to you. He's talking to his blocks.
Oh, he's talking to his blocks?
Yeah.
Well, fine. Be that way. Talk to your blocks. Travis is bringing back Blink. Really?
You're bringing it back.
That's where you're going with this? All right. So let's save that. No dice. All right. Each meta field pass GR Oh, I see what the issue is. I forgot to include GR in these as well. So I updated the interface to the get field view object function. I updated the inputs, but I did not update my function calls down here, so those were returning undefined as well. Simple Blinky list. Hey, our error has moved to line 53. Cannot find function map in object assigned to. Ah! So this is where I said before that I wasn't going to do this up above, split, comma, then map. So first we have to take our comma separated string, split it into an array, and then map over that array and apply. And one more time with feeling. There we go. Now we've got an assigned to that has been added to it. And if I add syscreated on just as an example, we get that one added as well. Now, one of the things that I would definitely want to enhance this one with is the ability to format those dates a little bit better. Baby was like, if you do that, it's just going to push your error to line 53. He's trying to coach me back there, but I'm a slow learner, so you didn't have to back me up on that. No, I did get
He's very emphatic about that error on line 53.
All right, so we're going to go, let's see, what else is there? Let's go with priority, so I don't have to deal with dates right now. And that's the only reason is because I don't want to deal with dates right now. Now I think on their side they put like a little dot. Yeah, they put a little dot.
You gotta put the dot in, man.
I know, I gotta put the dot in.
We like the dot.
Yeah.
Can we make that not black?
Make what?
Text.
Why?
Because it's... You want to differentiate importance using the...
Oh, you mean the style of... Okay, I see what you're saying.
I mean,
you're saying the
that, but
meta.
It's annoying me now.
It's annoying Sarah now, so we'll fix it. What's the... I think it's text muted is the bootstrap class.
Yeah, that gives it a nice... that's what they use out of box, too.
Bam. Okay, now we need some space. And to do this... how
would you do it? Because I just put padding on either side of the little button. Is there a better way?
You can padding, so you could do like a padding right, but if you want to add a dot only if they're only in between items, then you have to know when you're at the last item. So I want to say that ng repeat has, okay, so yeah, ng repeat has a few different offsets here: index, first, middle, last, even, and odd. And these are little Boolean helpers that return true or false.
Mhm.
So I can put an ng if, last, and it will, or if not last, and it'll do it on everything but the last one.
Oh, okay, kind of like the CSS selectors for
Yes,
last child, first
yes,
child. Okay.
yes, exactly like the CSS selectors for first and last. I like to do foo bar split map string trim, so white space is never an issue, i.e. glide list display values. Oh, good call, James Neal. Yeah, so what James was just saying in chat was that what he likes to do is he likes to put in a string trim. Yeah, James would be an authority on white space issues.
I'm so lost.
White Space Studios.
Oh, he's White Space. Haha, I get
He
it
runs
now.
White Space.
I'm sorry, I did not know that, James.
He's one of the big guys.
I'm still learning all the names and stuff, so.
Come on, you gotta get up with it.
I know. I gotta catch up. I gotta catch up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But so he was saying that he likes to turn around and do a string.trim so that we don't have any extra space, any leading or trailing spaces on our results. What I'm going to do is I think I'm going to stick that over in our, where is that function? See, this is why I did not want to do the inner functions, because it gets harder for me to see the inner functions. And is that just a string.trim? Is that how I use it? Is just I can't remember if that's an instance or a, yeah, I can just do, okay, so I can just tack trim to the end of it. So we'll do trim and trim. I think that'll work. Maybe. All right, so that should work. Ideally, in most cases, I'll have to go back to my article on what the results were on the return values for the get values, get display values, and all that, because I can't remember off the top of my head. That's half the reason I write this stuff down. All right, so then, all right, so we got our meta fields. Oh, right, I was doing the ng repeat. So what I want to do is I want to say span, and we'll do an ng if not last. And I think this should work. We'll just start with a dash for now. And there we go. You can see that it inserted a dash in between, but it didn't tack it at the end. So that's how we can turn around and use. That's how we can turn around and use the $ last, and I forget what the heck they called it. Special property. The $ last special property of the ng repeat directive. And I have to say that now that I'm looking at that special property, seems like they were just running out of terms when they came across this one. Directives, services, you know, they've got all these complex, fancy terms, and then they come up with special properties for this one. I feel like they might have phoned that one in.
Is there any particular reason to use the Angular last, first, whatever, versus just handling it in CSS?
Not that I can think of. Sarah asked if there was a reason to use the Angular versus the CSS. Not really that I can think of. The one advantage I can see to the CSS is that, quite obviously, if you ditch Angular, then that no longer has any meaning whatsoever. Whereas if you're using CSS to do it, then um, you can apply that same CSS to a different framework's rendered HTML, and it still works. That's the only advantage that I can see of using CSS, unless somebody else has any thoughts on that. Oh, and I just saw James Neal says, just beware that a get value field will return null if the field is empty. James, that is exactly what I was trying to remember that I couldn't remember from my analysis on it. So, normally I'm reluctant to do this sort of thing, but
do it.
I'm gonna. It's future Travis's problem. Future, whoever decides that they want to use this thing,
that's their problem.
It's your problem.
Sound like classic developer mindset.
Actually, now that I think about it, plus quote quote might only return the string null. That might be bad. I can't remember.
You did the experiments on it, didn't that cover it?
Did, but that requires going back and reading my content, and who wants to read my content?
I like it because you put pins in there. You're funny.
I'll go back and I'll read that one later, because that'll take me a while to figure out my thoughts behind it. Unless James has the answer. If James already has the answer and is already familiar with it, then we're set to go. I figure worst case scenario here. Wait. Got it. We can just do or quote quote. And that way, yes, article I'm too lazy to read.
That's what you were talking
about. I should just be able to do or, because if it comes back as a null, empty string, or undefined, any of those should be false and give me the empty string. So we're going to try that. And hopefully that works and doesn't break. Now, just because I want to keep some continuity, frankly, I honestly kind of like their little dot approach. And, no, don't stop, go back. I didn't want to click it. I wanted to inspect element on it so that I could hijack the dot. Give me the dot. Small. Where are you? Aha, the dot. Copy that. I'll paste that in here. There we go. James says it will print null doing plus quote quote. Thank you, James. Man, I'm going to just step down and let you take over the live stream. We might be better off.
We can have guests. Or you can have guests. I'm just here for comedic purposes.
Just here for comedic purposes. All right, so that's not shabby. It's not too shabby. It's not great. It's not great. Well, nobody asked for your opinion. Man, everybody's a critic.
He's mouthy.
He is mouthy. Blah, 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 blah. All right, so that's how I would go about setting up the meta fields. Really what it all comes down to is you're going to pass in an array of a comma-separated string of the internal field names. You know, in this case, I'm going to stick to, actually, no, go back. I'll keep it what I had it before, and we'll continue to iterate and play with that. But you're going to pass this comma-separated string of field names. You have to convert that into an array, iterate the array, and process that into your view object. Excuse me. Are we good back there?
We're good.
You're good now? Are you sure? Do you need to come up here, roll your face against my keyboard?
Oh, you finish your thing.
All right, so that's basically what we have to do in order to process the meta fields. After that, and I'm going to start looking to wrapping this up, so maybe next time we'll worry about the CSSing and the prettifying. And
that sounds good. That gives me some time to plan.
You can't plan. You got to shoot from the hip.
Dude, I got to pick fonts.
That's a few hours in and of itself.
Hey. Genius takes its time, okay?
All right, so the next thing I want to do before we wrap up for today is I want to add our anchor tag. Now, we do need an href, but I think I'm going to go with an ng-click on this one as opposed to the href. One of the things that I like, first of all, something you have to keep in mind about AngularJS is that this here is called an HTML template for a reason. It's not the actual rendered HTML. So when I specify an anchor tag here, that's not actually an anchor tag. That is an anchor directive that is built into AngularJS's parsing and digest loop engines. And basically, AngularJS is going to take this directive and process it into something else. Now, I like to use the ng-click over the href because the href forces you to provide a very specific URL. The ng-click, and I suppose I could do an ng-href as well to attain a similar result, but what I like to do is I like to say click item or something along those lines equal to function, pass the item. And what I like about this approach is that now I can introduce logic into my click. You know, what inevitably happens is your list starts out very simple. All you need to do is direct to a URL. But as you start adding, whether it's instance options or additional logic, eventually that simple href suddenly starts transforming into a more complicated set of logic to determine which URL to route to. So I like to create a routing function in order to handle that for me. In order to do that, we do need to inject the $location dependency. This is an AngularJS dependency. And basically, what we can do is we can do location search. What location search does is it's going to update basically everything after the question mark. I think in URL terms that's called the search parameters or something like that. Don't quite remember off the top of my head, but that's more or less what it's referring to. So basically I can say ID, form, table, I don't know, and I think it's sysid is the next one. So these are the URL parameters that are required for our in order to load up our form view. So what we can do is I can inject this and pass my item from the ng repeat. Okay, and here's where I have to do a little bit of thinking. My table Are we okay?
Yeah, we're okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. Opt or c.data.opt.table. That's the table we're querying from. So that's the form link we want to go to. And then, we need to extend this a bit because I do need the item's sysid. Fortunately, we've got a nice easy function here, so I can just copy that guy, paste it. Not a period. And what we can do is replace that with sysid. And that should allow us to do item.sysid.value. Now, if I load it, okay, so now we've got our link. Baby said query parameters, then felt a little jilted when you finally said URL parameters. Poor little baby. Nobody understands him.
So when you do this location.search, then you just have to set up the URL parameters and it like makes the link for you?
Yeah, so basically it doesn't make the link for you. The $location service will generate the URL internally, yes. And it will route to that URL. So for example, if I save this, again, keep in mind the ID is, the page ID is form. Yeah. We're going to the form page. The table is whatever table we have in our instance options, which for most of them is going to be incident. And then the ID should be the ID of the record.
But those parameters will change based on the page you're going to. Because like the form page, I know you need to put in the table and all that. So
we're going to get to that. Okay. We're going to get to that.
Sorry, I'm jumping.
We're going to get to that. So for example, if I click on this one now, it's going to go to ID form, table incident, sysid, and there's our ID. And there you go. It pulls up the form page.
I have learned something new today.
Okay.
That's awesome.
So next up, we can add some instance options. And this is what you were talking about, Sarah, is first of all, we can decide which page we go to. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that because we've got this in here, we can easily specify our URL parameters in this function as well. So for example, I can turn around and let's edit option schema. And let's add target page. And
you can even use instance options to set whether or not it appears in a new browser tab versus the same browser tab, couldn't you?
Yeah, I believe so. I'd have to look up which parameter controls. Now, this is one potential disadvantage of the ng-click is I don't think, or does it? Yeah. So the one thing I don't like about the click approach is that or the ng-click is that when you right click, you break the right click open new link. Mm-hmm. You break that behavior. And this is one of those things where in most cases, if you do open in new tab, you want to provide some visual indicator that clearly identifies that you are launching to a new tab or launching to a new window. Because most user experience expectations are that it's going to open up in the current window. And if I want it to open in a new tab, I should right click.
Yeah.
So that is one disadvantage, and I may play with that one a little bit to see if I can't keep the href, but do it in a slightly different way. we'll see how that one goes. And there may also be something out there that allows me to control that right click with the ng click. I'm not sure. Let's see, but we want to determine which page it goes to. And this is going to be behavior. All right, Jace. Jace is dipping out. Thanks for joining, man. Appreciate having you here. Always have a good time hanging out with you. And the default value here is going to be form. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm going to keep this one simple for now. I'm going to keep it as a simple string. I may work to improve the user experience later, but we'll call this one the form page. And I'll update this to ID in order to reflect target page ID. Okay, and then we need to update our options. Target page ID, options dot target page ID. And then what we can do is I can come over here and I can say c.data.opt.target page ID. So now through instance options, I can change what URL that goes to. Now with some additional effort, we can also update. Let's go ahead and do this. I can also update the URL parameters themselves. In order to do that, though, I have to extract it out because what we end up having to do is I would have to say params. James Neal says I got a typo. Good call.
Target.
Yep. Thanks, man. Good looking out. So for the params, basically what we can do is I can turn around and let's say that I had a MHZ had called out the typo. Sorry about that. Well, both of you, good call. So for the params, I could turn around and, this is something Sarah was bringing up earlier, which is that, the forms page may require table and sysid, but not all pages require those same parameters. Some pages call it sysid, some just call it ID, some pages call it something else entirely, KB article or something like that. So in order to specify the right criteria, we may end up having to create instance options where we can configure what the item ID gets in, what URL parameter the item ID gets injected into, and what URL parameter the table ID gets injected into. And to do that, we could turn around and we could say something like c.data.opt. sysid URL parameter, for example. If I created
dude,
that would have been insidious. It would have always worked until someone passed a different instance option variable or instance option value. Oh yeah. Aren't those the best the best errors to troubleshoot, the ones that work but not the way they're supposed to? Hours and hours and hours Entire lives have been lost and sacrificed on the altar of those kinds of errors.
Sorry, the thing that makes me lose my hair is misplaced semicolons and typos.
All right, but yeah, so with this we could turn around and we could set that parameter to item.sysid.value, for example. And let's do the same thing with table. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and create it. I mean, we're halfway there already. And then we'll wrap it up. Item. So it was sysid and it was table URL parameter. So then I'll remove these two. Or actually, wait a second. We need c.data.ops.table. Okay, so now I can remove these two and pass params to the search. Okay, I'm feeling pretty confident about that. Then we'll come over here and we'll say, actually, sysid URL. Let's keep our naming conventions consistent. Table URL parameter. So that one is going to be options dot parameter or what was it? sysid, not od. And then we'll have table URL parameter options dot table URL parameter or, and I'll say, no, my bad, just table. Yeah, table's what it was. Okay, so that's all set up. Last step is to edit our option schema and add sysid URL parameter, and default value will be sysid, and that's going to be behavior. Oops, I forgot the other one. And our last one is going to be table URL parameter, string, behavior, default value is table. And that should round that up. Okay, so now if we reload here, open up this one, it goes to form. Let's change this one to go to the ticket page. And so now this one's going to go to the ticket page. And if we were going to a page where we had to change our table and sysid parameters, now we can easily adapt those parameters to point it to the new page without having to go in and edit the code. We can use the exact same widget across the board. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for today. I think that gets me to where I wanted to be. I've got our anchor tag in there. I've got our URL. It clicks. We've got the meta. We've got the synchronous, asynchronous, and asynchronous with skeleton all working properly. And next time we'll dive into styles and making some optional styles for this. And that should wrap up this widget in this chapter. And then I've got some other ideas for the future. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this one for today. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it educational, helpful, interesting, or something that is somewhere relevant to worth your time. Thanks a lot, guys, and hope you have a good one.